And so that is what it means to obey the gospel in a sense. That is what it's not about avoiding the void. It's not about these five, tricks I remember a local pastor right at the end of 1989, he was doing a sermon series called 10 Sure Bets for the 90s, and it was about the 10 Commandments. It's like, oh, just obey these 10 commandments and you're going to have a great life, because God said in the Old Testament, if you want to live long and prosper in the lands, then just simply obey my laws, right? I would argue it's a bit of a misinterpretation of all of that. But that's for another series of talks. But it's avoiding the void. It's not about here are the 10 tricks, the 8 easy steps to avoid hardship and live a life of fulfillment and unity and joy and wholeness and completeness. That's not right. It's also not right to say that every single inconvenience in my life is somehow persecution, right? But instead, as I've been saying, this lack, this ambiguity, this antagonism, this sense of nagging incompleteness like Neo felt in the Matrix, this is something that we can embrace. This is something we can lean into. This is something that we can absolutely assimilate and find joy in the same way that Paul, who was not looking for ways to get persecuted. He was not looking for some reason to get arrested, but instead he was looking for ways to curtail his own rights and to limit his own freedoms. I mean, how often have we heard, especially during 2020, I have freedoms, I have rights, and you're trying to take away my freedoms. Well, Paul would say that the Christian life is about not letting your freedoms be taken from you, and certainly not about suing anybody who would try. But Christianity is about willingly sacrificing your freedom, willingly sacrificing your right or your privileges for the sake of the other, out of love. That's what it's about. That's what it means to embrace the gospel, okay? And so this void that we feel is supposed to be there. We're not supposed to avoid it. We're not supposed to navigate around it. The God is not a vending machine who dispenses that sense of wholeness and completeness, that love, joy, fulfillment, lasting happiness that we want. And if you just press the right buttons, not the sex, not the drugs, not the alcohol, not the money, the Jesus button, push that one and you'll get everything you want. That's not the gospel. In fact, Jesus rebuked the devil and then called Peter Satan for suggesting such a thing. But rather, the void is supposed to be there. We can find joy in the midst of it. We can find joy in the struggle. We can create beauty. I mean, all art, all film, all good music, it's all born out of struggle, right? I mean, even I've been really interested in the last 5 years or so in the history of hip-hop. And hip-hop as a genre simply could not have arisen from Leave It to Beaver. It couldn't have arisen from some suburban white picket fence, neighborhood of just wealthy middle-class Americans baking apple pie and watching the ball game, playing kick the can or whatever. It's like, no, you could not get this kind of art from that. It has to come from struggle. It has to come from lack. It has to come from a dearth, a famine of resources, right? And so the void is supposed to be there. We're not supposed to avoid it. We're not supposed to circumnavigate it. We're supposed to lean into it to the point where we even go as far as to limit, curtail, forfeit, forego, sacrifice our rights, our freedom, out of love for the other, out of concern that if I exercise the freedom that I'm entitled to, it might stumble, it might cause offense to someone else. And so in the same way that Jesus sacrificed his right as the Son of God not to be murdered, so Paul sacrificed his right as an apostle and as an emissary of the Son of God. He sacrificed his right to eat what he wanted, to get married, to charge money. He sacrificed all of it out of love for those who he's trying to save. I have become all things to all men, he says, if by any means I might save some of them. Okay? And so that is the gospel according to Satan. The gospel according to Satan is the gospel that you get in a lot of self-help. It's the gospel you get in a lot of American churches. It's the gospel you get in the sort of American dream, freedom, don't tread on me, all of this. But it's not the real gospel. The real gospel is about leaning into the void, accepting the suffering, voluntarily carrying your cross, not just waiting for someone to get mad at you, not waiting to get arrested or persecuted in some way, because that's not going to happen. And that's why, by the way, it's much more comfortable for us to talk about persecution in that sort of, institutional, state-wide kind of persecution, because we know it's not going to happen. So we're very comfortable with these verses about, oh, you're going to suffer, you're going to be, people are going to rise up against you and say all manner of evil against you. We know that that's not going to happen. We take the temperature of the world and the culture, and that's not likely to happen. So I have no problem with these verses. But when they start to hit close to home, when you're told that you might have to swallow your pride and curtail some of your rights and not exercise some of your freedoms, that's when we get mad. That's when we start suing people. And that's when we understand that whatever you're calling Christianity is not Christianity. Okay? The void is supposed to be there. Lean into it. Embrace the lack. Embrace the suffering. Find ways to go the extra mile for your neighbor, for the other, for the immigrant, right? And lean in to this sense of antagonism that is, as I said, woven into the fabric of reality, that is constitutive of the very nature of life itself.